Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited and thrilled today to dig into blockchain and Web3. Our guest today is Brandon Ferdig. He is the president of Minnesota Blockchain Initiative and also the founder of the Periphery Media. Brandon, super excited to have you on the show. Thank you.
It's an honor to be asked anytime to speak about these topics, and you do a fantastic job with your podcast too. So it's an honor. Thanks for asking me to come on today and talk about this stuff.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate your compliment as well.
Mhm.
I usually start out with origin story, kind of like comic book issue one, episode one. Just, who is Brandon Ferdig? How did you get to be doing what you're doing now? And just kind of share your story if you would.
Well, I don't know if I rival a comic book. There's no like spider bite or nuclear reaction or anything
Yeah,
like that, but well, maybe there were some spider bites. I grew up in northern Minnesota in a tiny town out in the country. So in that sense, I'm a bit atypical. I'm not like a suburban kid or something. Grew up in the country, but I recognized as a high schooler I had a knack for like hearing people's stories and like asking their life experiences and recognizing cultural differences. Up there weren't very many cultures. There's the white majority, and then there's Native Americans, and that was it.
sure. Hmm.
But that was enough for me to recognize that the clear differences there between those two groups, and I was curious and just intrigued about, well, how do they see life? How do they live life on the reservations up there and this and that? And that would carry on into my 20s when I got into writing and traveling around the world. And I've got some stories here that I've written for the Star Tribune. They're not like straight news pieces like, oh, at this time, so and so went in and robbed the bank, or the school board did this or that. It's not like straight news. It's like my observations and then a little bit of my thoughts. And there's usually these longer form stories, and I've written several for them over the years, whether about America life or about um, observations I've made around the world. This piece here that you can best see is about the Hmong community coming to Minnesota and how they
Okay,
themselves settled into a very small town, a
sure.
famously Minnesotan small town of Walnut Grove that Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote about,
Yes,
in
yes.
Lord of the Rings. Little House on the Prairie, excuse
Yeah,
me. And now that town is about 30–40% Hmong. So they
really.
painted this big mural of a Hmong woman and like Laura Ingalls Wilder,
Huh.
like a frontier woman next to each other. And this town is and so for this community to come from Southeast Asia and find a home in Minnesota in such a profound way, to me was a real impactful story. And believe it or not, this is how I came to blockchain because it wasn't like I was in finance or I wasn't a software developer. It was a guy at my gym back in 2013. He's the first one to tell me the B word. And
Uh-huh.
uh, he's like, "You heard of Bitcoin?" Almost like he was a dealer. Like, "Hey,
Yeah,
kid,
right.
you know this
Yes.
Bitcoin?" And I'm like, "No, what's that?" And he explained it. And it didn't take long, maybe because he's a great explainer, or I just saw the vision of what Bitcoin would do if it became mainstream, like how that would just change, sort of like how I recognize how the Minnesotan fabric has changed with the arrival of this new community from Southeast Asia.
Sure.
I thought, wow, how different would the world look if money was not just uh, solely at in the control of nation states? Because
Hmm.
money, and I didn't think outside that fishbowl. I didn't see outside of, you're right, Kyle was his name, Kyle. Like money is associated with the country. Most countries have their own money, and it just seemed like that's how money worked. But that isn't necessarily how money works. And what
Right.
if that changed? And what if there was a new kind, not going back to gold, which I was familiar with because I was involved with some politics. I was a big Ron Paul guy,
Okay. Yeah.
like in 2008, 2012, and I got familiar with a lot of the political process because of my interest in his campaigns. But there's a lot of gold bugs in those circles, and
Sure.
and God love them, and gold's been doing great, so that everyone's happy. but I thought Bitcoin serves as sort of the 21st century gold. Uh, and and so what would that do to the world if governments can, especially the United States, which leverages its control of the dollar so much,
Right.
to not just extract value, but to and I use that word diplomatically. I don't mean they're always exploiting. I just mean to tax and to to fund their operations in the US and abroad, but then also to control other countries. Like, oh, we're going to sanction you, or we're going to cut you off, or we're not going to give you aid, or whatever. Well, what if there's a money now outside their control? And it kind of blew me away, like the implications of that. So, but that was in 2013. I still traveled. I lived in East Africa for 9 months. I sold my Bitcoin like a complete dummy. Um, yeah, we all have those stories, I think, though. And then I was interested in Ethereum because that too blew me away. Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, okay, so now we can program this cryptocurrency, and what will that kind of programmability have on how we operate? Not just do a financial transaction, but in how we um, distribute money, how we um, maybe even like distribute orders or like actions, like do this, do that. Like maybe things can be just much more automated. I kind of saw that
Mhm.
future. And and it just evolved from there until I was working doing marketing because I took my writing and my internet marketing, like social media stuff, blogging, and I used that for some contract work. And I was working for a crypto startup, which had been here in the Twin Cities. And then they introduced me to this organization called Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, and it was sort of getting off the ground again after going dormant in a bear market.
Sure.
And we came back in 2021 with the fall event. And then in summer of 2022, the next summer, they needed leadership.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, well, I've got connections all over because of my journalism. And like I had known Tom Emmer for almost 15, 20 years
Uh-huh.
because of back when I was with Ron Paul campaign and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, there was some overlap there, business leaders, some political leaders, um, and of course my interest in the technology. And so I stepped up to run the organization. And so I've been doing that now. It'll be 3 years this fall. Um, and that's how you found me
Right.
because we have events. I think one of our board members first met you.
Yeah.
Um, our former board member, Lisa, who's doing her own great crypto or work in the blockchain supply chain industry. And so, yeah, so we've got this nonprofit now, Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, that holds monthly events. We hold uh, spring and fall conferences. We've got a membership. We like to highlight local builders. We've got a podcast of our own. We work with some local companies. The industry we found that is most um, interested in our work is law. And
Really?
Being in Minnesota, we thought that might have been retail
Interesting.
or agriculture or something like that, or med tech, and some of the uses for blockchain there. But that might be a little ways off yet, technologically and mainstreaming that, adopting that. But what is relevant right now is law firms seeking clarity, and so a lot of regulations and bills being brought forth in Congress. Um, and so there's a lot of legal activity.
Uh-huh.
And so we've had four corporate sponsors, and three of them are law firms.
Huh.
Um, so yeah, so we just do what we can to best help those in our community. And I know that sounds really vague, but if we had Target call us up tomorrow and say, "Hey, we want some help with how to integrate blockchain or NFTs or something," we would be right there to help them. But right now, the industry that's been most um, uh, I guess, in need or reaching out to us is law. And then we also just grow the local community of builders, and there's hundreds, and just having events for them to come to, a Slack channel for them to discuss crypto and blockchain
Uh-huh.
on that kind of thing. That's what we're here to do.
That's awesome. It's interesting that you say law. So the very first time I heard of the blockchain and crypto. I used to be a corporate M&A lawyer for a number of years, and
Okay.
it was at a CLE, continuing legal education event,
Okay.
where I first heard the name or the word blockchain and Bitcoin, and I mean, and then I subsequently went to as many of those as I could to learn more and more about it. But like that was the impetus way back when I was practicing law, getting interested in all this stuff.
When was that? What year was that?
Oh, I knew you'd ask that question. It's probably
Mm,
around the same time. I mean, it's
yeah.
way back when Bitcoin first started. So
Oh,
I don't even know what the year was, but it was when it was
I know.
first.
They all blend together.
Right, I
It's
know, but it's many, many moons ago. I mean, I've been
yeah.
practicing law for many years, but yeah, I vividly remember that. Like blockchain, what is this? And coming home and telling my family, I'm like, what about this thing, the blockchain and Bitcoin, and what is this? And
How did they
yeah,
respond?
well, they just, tuned me out. They just thought it was just some other legal thing, legal
Hmm.
theory or something that, that
Yeah.
non-lawyers would have zero interest in hearing about. So I just blended into the noise of legal
I'm not
talk.
sure if, yeah, back then or even now, it's much dinner table conversation, but
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in my circles, I mean, everyone's, you know, pretty heavy into crypto. And I mean, you can see
mhm.
like you noticed before we did the show, my Bitcoin and Ethereum behind me. I mean, those are my two biggest holdings and always will be, and I'll never
Yeah.
sell them. But yeah, but maybe a little bit about the community here in the Twin Cities. I mean, are there a lot of builders, a lot of people working on the blockchain, and just what's the culture like here locally?
Yeah. Yeah. That's been fun to have revealed in this position of running this organization. It's I guess I'm not surprised at the community that we have. It's very Minnesotan,
Yeah.
stereotypically, meaning we have a lot, meaning it's not Silicon Valley,
Hmm.
it's not Miami or New York, right? It is very Minnesotan. You have a lot of educated, smart, but there aren't a ton of startups here. There are a number of individuals,
Yeah.
some of them just completely on their own, building some really cool project. A lot of them working for projects elsewhere, and then they'll come to
Sure.
our monthly meetup and discuss it. Like, hey, I'm part of a small team working on this. We're all remote. We've had several of those kinds of blockchain involved professionals come speak at our events. But yeah, there's a lot of educated, hardworking, smart people um, that really make up the community. There's also an artist, NFT artist kind of
Okay.
cohort locally, so they'll um, whatever. It's a whole different demographic, which is also the appeal for me
Uh-huh.
for blockchain. I mean, just in those two cryptocurrencies behind you, they represent just an explosion of cultural potential.
Right.
Each of them do.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a little bit more. Um, it's not quite as a big of an umbrella, although it can be as big as it, but it can be as big as anything. And actually it is, but Ethereum just has more expression
Right.
because of the whole NFT meme coin. So much has flowered out of the garden that Ethereum is
Right.
has I was gonna say has hoed, but that sounds kind of funny. Um,
It's
so has
true.
planted. We'll go with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember
Uh,
a few years
so you
ago.
get these
Yeah.
different subcultures within these different worlds, but that's what's great. That's what makes cryptocurrency like the internet, like AI. It doesn't have to be a political issue, which
Right.
it is, which is unfortunate, but I think that'll evaporate, and I think it is as we see people of both sides of the aisle
Uh-huh.
embrace the technology as just being something that can benefit humanity, whether you're a funky artist creating NFTs or whether you're a Wall Street guy in a suit trading Bitcoin futures.
Yeah. It's totally true. I mean, I was trying to think how many years ago it's been. I think 5 years ago, Gary Vaynerchuk had his first VCon here at US Bank Stadium.
It
And then
was
so I went to,
2022.
and
It
I've
was
been,
only 3 years ago.
was it 3 years ago? Because they didn't do
Yeah.
one this summer. And last year
Mhm.
was in LA. The year before was Indianapolis, and before that it was here.
Mhm.
And I've gone to, and I was an early, VFriend, like one holder. So I've been to all three, and they've all been the same in some ways, but it was just interesting to see just what you described at that first one at US Bank Stadium here in the Twin Cities. I mean, it was buttoned up business people. It was true like NFT artist creators. It was entrepreneurs. It was just like blockchain creators, just all coming together from, you just talk to people at the conference over 3 days. I mean, it was truly people from all walks of life, but are were just like united in this vision for the future of what the blockchain can be, what NFTs are, what they can be. And again, that was early, NFT boom,
Mhm.
when so much of it was about collectibles and not even really to the utility yet of NFTs, but so much fun. And then it evolved. And then the last VCon in LA 2 summers ago, um, it was much more entrepreneurial, um, maybe a little less straight up NFTs,
Mm.
um, but just fascinating. Just again, but it was still people from all walks of life, a lot more influencers, that kind of stuff at that LA one. It may just been the venue, but just all sorts of different walks of life with just this common interest and fanaticism over what the blockchain is and what it can be and NFTs and just building and creating and
Another good one is ETH
yeah.
Denver
Hmm.
because there you see, I went in 2022, and where I was getting at a moment ago about Bitcoin being a little less, I guess, varied in its culture. Like if you go to a Bitcoin event, which I went to Bitcoin Miami once the same year, 2022, and there's plenty of variety, but Bitcoiners are less across the board. I guess the kinds of it's a little bit um, more of a singular culture. Whereas ETH Denver, you get, you know, pot smoking out in public, in Denver, and they're wearing funky clothes and they're artists.
Yes, right.
But then you also had people discussing, oh, what if we had a DAO to help, um, I don't know, with this philanthropic cause, and so they're of a whole other like, they're more buttoned up, and then you've got proper finance people, and yeah, that's another fun one to see all
Yeah.
just a rainbow of people at.
How would you describe the Bitcoin culture at Bitcoin Miami? Like, what is that more singular culture? How would you describe it?
Um, well, the Bitcoin culture, just to speak about it locally, I think
Sure.
the local representation of it is very good, and very representative of Bitcoin culture. You see it all over on X too. Um, there's it kind of reminds me of I told you at the beginning we probably wouldn't talk religion. I joked about it, but here I go. Um, but it reminds me of how do you want to conduct your Christianity? And follow me with this.
Sure.
So, or you could just apply this to any kind of community, but we'll just stick to the church analogy. Um, so are you going to have like more like strict rules of what to follow and standards, or is everything going to fly?
Hmm.
And if you have these rules and standards, you're going to have people that are um, maybe a touch constrained, feel like a little constrained by that, but they see it as discipline. They see it
Sure.
as, no, this actually frees us up because yeah, we get up at the same time every day. Yeah, we do this, we do that, but that frees us up to do more with our lives, you
Sure.
know? Um, and then they're not as inclusive by definition because um not everything's going to fly.
Right.
So
Right.
if you come in and you talk let's say into a church, and you say, oh, we should have we should allow polygamy, or we should allow something like that, and the church is like, no, you got to go with that, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
are you being intolerant, Or are you being smart
Right.
and judicious and just appropriate with, no, 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 we have to have a standard or everything could just unravel. Like that's how Bitcoiners are. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact,
Right.
I think it's beautiful and great.
Hmm.
Um, and I appreciate those churches, those kinds of Christians too, because you go to a service of theirs and it is beautiful.
Hmm. Yeah.
It is beautiful. But but the dark side or the trade-off is a better way to put it is, they might have close communion.
Hmm.
So you're not allowed. Sorry, you can't come up and take communion. And that's where critics are like, "Oh, come on. Like you're going to refuse the blood and body of Christ to this person because they're not part of your." Yeah, we are.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it seems cold and it seems intolerant. But they're like, "No, no, no. We have to respect our standard
Right.
or things can unravel." And that's how
Right.
Bitcoiners are. And so
Okay.
they have a real buttoned up, tight culture. But so do they sometimes miss things? Are they sometimes closed-minded to things? I think so. But and I don't say that to mean that they're lost or mean or anything like that, although
Sure.
some of them are mean. I just mean that yeah, they might miss some opportunities sometimes because or they might miss the boat on a thing or two because they're so locked into that. But at the same time, what they're locked in on is awesome. And because
Right.
they are focused, they they do wonderful things and you can't argue with that method.
Right.
You can compare it to bodybuilding or something like that. And oh, that guy, he's so uptight. He never gets to have any fun. He never stays up past 10 o'clock. He never has any sweets. He never this or that. And does he miss out? Yeah, probably. But look at him. He's doing
Uh-huh.
great. So
Yeah.
how can you argue with it at the same time? And if I would have held Bitcoin, there's I don't know any other crypto that I would have done better with had I just held it over the long term.
Hmm.
Obviously, I could have bought Ethereum at, $10 when it first came on Coinbase, and that would have been a remarkable investment too.
Yeah.
But you can't. So that's what I mean when I say the Bitcoin culture. I don't want
Okay.
to ramble on that, but it's just that it's that and that's interesting to look at from a 10,000 foot maybe like writer's perspective is
Hmm.
that you see this all over the place, whether it's in fitness or whether it's in religion or whether it's in politics or whether it's in crypto, this tendency to like, are we going to be very strict with this or are we going to be loosey-goosey? I've done work with the homeless community. I did a
Uh-huh.
documentary about a large encampment in
I saw
Minneapolis
that.
a few years ago, and it's the same thing there. The same discussion there, and you see where either side has its trade-offs. Like, are we going to let so how are we going to fix the homelessness issue? Well, some say, well, we need to just have a place for them to live. And if we have rules, then some of them won't qualify, and we can't do that. That's inhumane. So we're going to have a place where everything goes. But then the place goes to
Huh.
hell
Yeah.
because everything goes. So there's use, and then they end up fighting over the drugs, or they end up getting high and they die, or they, whatever.
Yeah.
I've seen these places and I've had close people close to me live in these places and I've seen
Okay.
them with my own eyes. So I can definitely attest to this. But at the same time, if you do have rules, like you got to be sober, you got to be this, you got to be that, yeah, the place is going to operate better, but there are some people who struggle with addiction who just won't qualify and they'll be left out in the cold, literally.
Mm.
And it seems cold-hearted to do that. But what do you do, right? So
Yeah.
it's really the old um I mean, I think this all boils down to the dyad of nature, liberal, conservative,
Sure.
masculine, feminine, right? And I could go on and on about this because I observed when this is what got me on the homelessness issue was when I traveled the country, I was interviewing people in different cities just for the fun of it, really, in the
Hmm.
summer of 2017. And I went to the Pacific Northwest, and that's when I really first saw the issue of addicted homeless out on the streets
Okay.
using and doing the old, they call it the fentanyl flop now, where they're
Yeah.
hunched over. But I saw it back then, and it probably was just straight heroin, but it was the same. it was the same posture where they're just hunched over, they're kind of swaying. And I was blown away because I hadn't seen that before. Now you see it in Minneapolis on occasion,
I
but you
know.
didn't see it then. And I saw these cities being kind of overtaken by this issue, and I thought, yeah, you need some kind of conservative ass kicking, or
Yes.
not that you're going to kick the ass of a homeless person,
Right.
but it's that tough love kind of thinking. And there is no conservative leadership to speak of in these cities.
Right.
Um, because they really veer to the left. And I thought, yeah, you really need a balance. And what really cemented that idea for me on this trip was when I went and I visited um, some marijuana growers in Southern Oregon
Okay.
who were living in an area called the state of Jefferson, or it's affectionately called that because back in the day there was a movement to create this other U.S. state of
Okay.
Northern California and Southern Oregon. This is going to be the state of Jefferson, and they even have a flag.
Really?
And dude, this is a really cool story. Because speaking of like analogies and comparisons, this area, it's you'll see people driving around with that state of Jefferson flag out in the back of their truck. It feels a lot like being in the South and seeing the Confederate flag.
Okay.
Like this was a movement to try to be something that they weren't able to politically pull off, sort of like the Confederacy in the South.
Yeah.
There is a romanticization of this ideal of being kind of maybe in the South it's rebel, but in this area of the country it's very independent.
Hmm.
In fact, there's a town in that area that voted against having a sheriff. They said, we'll just police ourselves, and it made the New York Times and all that. So this is a really Wild West kind of
Oh my
area. But
gosh.
there's also a lot of marijuana growing. So there's a lot of
Huh?
hippies too.
Yeah.
And I asked these marijuana growers, I'm like, so are you the hippies or are you the rednecks? And they said, oh, we're the hippies. But we need the rednecks because when we grow, um, in the fall, when we harvest, we hire the former like vets, the former like soldiers to come and with their AK-47s and they stand watch over our crop.
Oh wow.
Otherwise it'll get robbed because we got these trees that are growing this pot, right? That's very valuable. So it's like, well, you can't just have a bunch of hippies out there smoking pot and playing drums. They'll get robbed, so they got to
Right.
hire the muscle. And
That
that's
is
where
wild.
the redneck comes in and um yeah, it just like if you're a space alien watching this, you're just you're probably getting a good chuckle out of is seeing that activity in Southern Oregon. But at the same time, there's something profound in needing the hippie and the redneck to come together to um, make a whole. It's a yin yang thing, and to bring it back to crypto, Ethereum does this especially well, but also in Bitcoin too. You've got, like I said, the artist and the Wall Street guy coming together under the same tent as well. You really got to, for the better whole, you need both. And what's wrong with the country right now, if we can go political,
Sure.
is that instead of seeing both sides complement each other, which is what, like, say, a good marriage does if you've got the masculine and the feminine, or a good society does if you've got the liberal and the conservative. Um, but they're not complementary.
Mhm.
They're contrasting. They're antagonistic. They want to go their own way, and that really is where a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Mhm. Yes.
So anyway,
How about before we started recording, you mentioned kind of some parallels to blockchain to some societies you've seen around the world popping up that are, almost creating their own countries and new things. So maybe talk a little bit about that, what you've seen
sure.
and
So, yeah. Well, the idea of creating your own society. Um, because look, I think practically all of the land has been settled or claimed,
uh-huh.
right? So like it used to be, at least just, the last wave of this, when the New World was discovered. So for the few centuries following that, it was like, well, we're tired of how things are going here in Europe or wherever we're from, China or wherever we're from, and I'm going to go make a home in the new world. And of course, there's a whole discussion to be had about the people who are already living here and the displacement of them. Um, but given that there was this new country established, um, there was an opportunity. There was a lot of open land, so people had a chance to go and start over. Whether you're building a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, New York, or whether you're starting a whole new religion in Utah. Well, that opportunity is really no longer available unless we're going to colonize Mars or something, right? All the land has pretty much been spoken for. So there's been this movement over the recent decades of, well, maybe we can build a bunch of floating bases and let's have seasteading, they call it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Or hey, there's actually some unclaimed desert. Why don't we go and take that in the Sahara? And apparently there was some guy in the Sahara that said, "This is my land. This is my country." So there have been a few attempts like this that haven't really held or taken root. But then the internet comes along, and I think that's kind of the necessary element that these movements have been waiting for. Because what I think the next frontier of whether it's finance or uh, media and a lot of things, frankly, it's the digital frontier. And that enables a lot of fluidity and ease, efficiency with which things can be started and kept together and operated. So a startup society took a while. They talked to Nicaragua. I think it was Nicaragua. That didn't work out. They talked to Honduras. That didn't work out. They talked to Honduras again, and then it did work out. And then in 2020, I think they after getting a constitutional amendment passed in Honduras, they broke ground on um sorry, they broke ground on Prospera,
Okay.
um, which is they were given 55 acres on an island off of the coast of Honduras. The island is called Roatan. Some cruise
Okay.
ships stop there. They got a huge reef system north of the island. It's the second largest reef system after the Great Barrier Reef. So there's a ton of
Really?
diving and snorkeling there. Um, that's probably its claim to fame. And it's more Caribbean than it is Central American in culture,
Okay.
although there's plenty of Central American influence. But there's blacks, there's whites, there's a lot of English, there's a lot of dollar being used. And on this island, Prospera got 55 acres to settle. And they did, and they have. And they said, okay, we're going to establish a zone that is underneath the Honduran Constitution. So it's not its own country. It's property of Honduras. But it's property of Honduras like Hong Kong is property of China.
Uh-huh.
And Hong Kong has its own currency. Hong Kong has its own voting. It's a democracy. Hong Kong has its own internet freedom. And I don't even know if Prospera has that level of autonomy over Honduras, but it does set its own taxes. It does establish its own local leadership. I think it can also have its own port, but with that, they can set regulations as well. So if you want to build, say, a restaurant there or set up your business there, if just to have a one-room office, it's super easy. And again, the internet makes that a lot easier. Um, right now, an industry that's doing well there is biotech.
Okay.
So if you want to come here and try some experimental gene therapy,
Huh.
a few biotech startups have found home there. And so some influencers have flown down there now to get some new gene therapy that they can't get in the US because the FDA
Okay.
doesn't allow it, as far as I know. Um, yeah, and local Hondurans, a lot of local Hondurans like it. Some of them don't, so that you'll see that in the headlines if you Google Prospera, and that's probably what you'll see first. But there's a lot of Hondurans that do really like it. They hire a bunch of Hondurans, And Honduran developers that want to build don't have to wait 3 years to try to break ground on something on the mainland. They can come to Roatan Island and they can get something started within months.
Huh.
And so on at Prospera on this 55 acres, they've now built 13-story condo business mixed use tower. It's the largest building on the island.
Really?
And this Honduran developer was able to um, build this thing relatively fast. He was impressed with the speed at which he could get the permits and begin breaking ground, find the workers, to make it happen. And now they're filling up. They're selling condos. You can buy one right now if you want to live on this building with ocean views.
Huh.
Um, um, or set up your business there. Right now, it's some of these biotech companies, but it's a really exciting, I think, development in what I think, again, to kind of look at the 10,000 foot perspective, the the wave of these startup societies that I think we'll see more of. Who knows how well Prospera does if it's here in 100 years or if it's here in even 10 years from now. We'll see. It could be the biggest story in the world, or it might not work. I mean, who
Uh-huh.
knows? But anything can happen. But if not prosper, I think others like it will, because there's clearly an, a demand for this. These biotech companies are going down there. Other companies, it provides a new banking opportunity. It provides a new real estate opportunity. It
Mhm.
provides a new, um, opportunities for just finding work, laborers.
Mhm.
And I went to a conference down there in February, and I'm working on a piece right now. I've drafted it that compares humanity in a startup society like this versus humanity in an existing society, an existing government, like here in Minnesota or any U.S. state or any country. And I was struck by the difference in culture. It felt like any company startup versus, say, a tried and true blue chip company.
Uh-huh.
And the trade-offs are there, right? Like you're
Sure.
in this startup, you're fast moving, you're open-minded. Um, and the blue chip one, you kind of have a tried and true way of doing things. If a new if a new trend comes along, you're slow to adopt because you're trying to turn a battleship. And it was that kind of, and one more trade-off of a traditional government, as we see them today, is that right now things, as I described earlier, the two
Yes.
sides, the two Republicans, Democrats, are at each other's throats. Down there in Prospero, um, I never ever once heard politics mentioned.
Huh.
People were simply interested in building. They were interested in learning about one another. There was a common interest, and of course there were conservatives and liberals there, but they got along in a complementary way where the typical liberal might do a meditation class, or just to be stereotypical here,
Yeah.
they 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 express their strengths, whether they were doing a health and wellness seminar, whether they were doing a meditation class, whether they were doing some sort of group therapy. All of that was happening there. Or maybe on the more conservative entrepreneurial side, then you saw people having seminars and discussions about that, or it's just simply working on that. Um, while they were there with their team or by themselves. And so there was a harmony uh, between people of different ideologies that I observed. And yeah, I don't know, because it's a fresh start, people weren't so concerned about politics. But I think also the um, the addition of one more element I'll introduce to you here is what also makes that possible, and that's the element of polycentric law,
Hmm.
where there isn't just one system that controls how everything is done.
Okay.
The one system there that does control certain aspects, like this is how much taxes you'll pay, things like that, that's fairly hands off. It's libertarian, I think you would
Okay.
describe it as. So we're going to set this up as kind of a libertarian area. People want to build this or that, you're free to do what you want to do. But even within the confines of those rules, you can choose, and this is the beauty of the internet and
Uh-huh.
um, the way that Prospera was set up. You can adopt a different legal framework. So one restaurant might use a legal framework, whether it's building codes, food safety standards from their home country. Let's say they're from Switzerland. We're going to adopt these. But then I come from Minnesota and I set up a restaurant and I'm going to adopt the Minnesota uh,
Huh.
health standards for my restaurant. And it feels a little Wild West. It feels like, how's
Yeah.
that going to work if they're under
Right.
different standards? But what they're trying to do down there is let people operate under the system that they choose, not the one that we're going to impose on them from the top down for
Uh-huh.
everybody. And there's a real trade-off there because, like I said, it can feel a little unwieldy. It can feel confusing, chaotic. Like, well, I don't know which, if I'm walking into a restaurant, what standards are they going to be operating under? And that's a valid question. But at the same time, they're trying to find that middle ground where they do allow that freedom so that um, there's less to tie everyone together under one system. And that creates harmony. Um, why do conservatives and liberals fight now? And I think a big part of that is because if Kamala wins the presidency, we're going to see all this change happen. If Trump wins the presidency, we're going to see all this change happen. And there is no discussion like that down there
Uh-huh.
because if leadership of Prospera changes, it doesn't mean there's going to be a bunch of money sent to these NGOs or to
Hmm.
the arts or to this religious organization because there is no control like that from the top down. So there's less to argue over. They're not fighting over who gets to control all this money and stuff because there is no, right? Like people can
Uh-huh.
choose their own way of doing things. And when you have the freedom to do that, you're not telling others how to live their life. And there's less at stake at the ballot box, so to speak.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know. There was a lot there I just
Yeah. And I was
threw
going to
at
ask the
you.
question as you were talking, you might have answered it. So you said you went to a conference. So you been there
I've been there 3 times, yeah.
3 times? So what is it like on the, I mean, you've described like big picture what it's like, but what is it like physically going there and just soaking up the culture and doing it?
Yeah, well, go in there when they have one of these pop-up cities, which they have now because of another organization that's taking root there called Infinita. Infinita is a biotech community,
Huh.
and they're all about funding, gathering um, people in this biotech industry to host speakers, to have people come and collaborate. And I attended 2 weeks during their big pop-up city from January to April 1, I think.
Okay.
And I went for 2 weeks in February when they had a particular focus on cryptocurrency during that time.
Okay.
And so that was appropriate for me given my work, but I was able to just soak in the whole culture, like you said. When there isn't one of these pop-up cities, it's pretty quiet there.
Okay.
But when there is, then there are hundreds of people around, right? And I know it's a small number, like, ooh, hundreds of people in a city. But in a smaller area, hundreds of people, it feels like something, right? You've
Yeah.
got a community, right? Maybe like well, maybe this is a dumb example, but I'm trying to think of like another pop-up city like Burning Man or something where you get these people together to live together, to to function as a community temporarily.
Okay. I was
And
going
they
to
do.
ask that and maybe answer that with Burning Man. Like, what is a pop-up city? Like, what does that actually mean?
Well, it means they basically rent out all those units in that 13-story condo.
Okay.
Prospera has also begun taking over management of a nearby golf resort,
Okay.
pretty much adjacent to where their 55 acres is. So now they've got this control of this expansive resort golf course area, and that's where they put me up for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Was in one of the the villas there, which was
Nice.
fine by me. It
Yeah.
was unbelievable, actually. I was spoiled. Like, though, this is the kind of opportunity you get when you come to a place early,
Yes.
before it like goes kind of crazy and gets popular. Um, so yeah, I had this amazing place to stay in, and a lot of visitors like myself were staying at this resort. Others stayed in that tower, and then they'd have a lot of events, and a lot of the events were organized by the individuals themselves. So, like I said, maybe one of the more health and wellness um, focused people would have a yoga class in the morning right on the beach,
Huh.
or on the dock or something, or the pier. Maybe um, someone else would have a software developers meetup, and then they would just sort of like even that part of it is um, very bottom up,
Okay.
where it's sort of a community led. So if you want to create an event, put it on the calendar. Go ahead, and we'll see how many people come to your game night or to your software development meetup or to your biotech talk or whatever. And there's a lab there now. They have this science lab that's I can't remember who it's sponsored by. I think some crypto company. And um and in there they're playing with like let's brew this beer, let's edit these genes, let's let's make these t-shirts, let's like they're just doing all kinds of stuff in this big lab space. Again, it's very bottom up, so you could go there and
Yeah.
experiment with it. It's a big sandbox,
Uh-huh.
is maybe how to think of it. Um, and so the people that go there, um, they're all go-getters, self-starters, open-minded, fun-loving, at least the ones that I met, supportive of each other. It's a great community. I just I can't really say enough about it.
Yeah.
You got to get there, right?
Uh-huh.
So a lot of people that were there had some sort of means by which to live there.
Sure.
Um, and so maybe that was a part of it too. There was some self-selection in that you had people there that were able to take a week or a month off. Maybe they were working remotely, maybe they had saved up for a while, I don't know. But the economics of it is you gotta pull your own weight.
Mm-hmm.
Some people volunteer for the pop-up city and they get maybe their housing covered. But still, you gotta, pay for your own food and so forth. So finding your own way is big. It's yeah. There's not a lot of free rides. You got to go there and pull your own weight. Um, it's a little rough around the edges at some points. Like to get
Uh-huh.
out to the 55 acres, you got to take this rough dirt road. So
Uh-huh.
it's like, where are we going, right? Because yeah, it's funny how at some points you can forget you're on a development in a developing nation,
Sure.
right? Where it's bumpy, you might see a snake go across the dirt road or something, some bird you haven't seen before. Uh, and then at other times you're on the resort and you think, oh wow, I'm in Florida or I'm in Hawaii or something.
Uh-huh.
But it's an interesting, uh, it's a unique flavor of a tourist destination. Uh, just the island culture, and then also, of course, with the addition of Prospera and Infinita, you've got this, and it's very international too.
Uh-huh.
So whereas if you create a conference in the U.S., it might be mostly Americans. That wasn't the case here at all. English was dominant, but you'd hear a
Okay.
lot of Spanish, of course, and there's a lot of people from Latin America. But I think I met people from 15 countries, maybe up to 20.
Really?
A lot of Europeans. I met a guy from Singapore, I think one from the Philippines, a handful of Americans, a couple of Canadians, and a lot of Latin Americans and Europeans. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So that's part of it too. So it was a totally new kind of society, as far as I was concerned, that blended to get back to the yin and the yang, it blended a lot of the best of both. And I write that in this story that I'm creating about it. You have this kind of liberal, idealized diversity, but then you've got this conservative, idealized unity,
Hmm.
common, common, like not necessarily ethnic culture, uh, but lifestyle maybe, or ethos
Okay.
that kind
Okay.
of kept people all unified.
Yeah.
And the blend of those two worked really well, you
So
know.
your piece that you're writing, where will that come out, or where will that be published, or do you even know yet?
No, I had been working on it for the paper, but
Okay.
they recently decided that they're no longer running these long form style of stories, unfortunately.
That's too
So
bad.
I'm actually looking for a home for it.
Okay.
Um, I think it's a great piece, and because I compare it to Minnesota, and
Uh-huh.
of course Minnesota has many advantages, and there's an interesting parallel in that both are med tech focused.
Sure.
In fact, one of the biotech guys down there mentioned Minnesota
Really?
without knowing even where I was from. So
Huh.
I thought that was kind of cool. Um, but while their society was operating as it was, I thought, hitting on all cylinders, Minnesota's house was being boycotted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I thought, this is very telling. And so
Absolutely.
I say at the end of the piece, and this is where the commentary part comes in, Minnesota, you got to get your act together. Like, we got to think about the future,
Hmm.
or it's going to leave us behind. And other US states have been more proactive when it comes to both regulation in the medtech space. Like
Uh-huh.
Montana's way out ahead of the game in that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a number of states that have jumped way out ahead of Minnesota when it comes to adoption for blockchain,
Yeah.
Bitcoin, crypto. So um, it won't be in the Star Tribune, but no love lost. I mean, I have them to thank for publishing a lot of my pieces, but
Sure.
unfortunately, they just decided, they've just made the decision that they don't have the room for a big piece like that, and I
Uh-huh.
understand the way newspapers are going. Um, but I'm also working on a video essay where I'll just turn it into something for my YouTube channel.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe hopefully this podcast gets it out and maybe it finds a home for the long form piece. It's crazy. It seems like people don't can't read full books anymore either. It's like this short
Yeah,
attention span. It's really sad because it's so good to read long form. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day that had sat down and spent a lot of time reading a book that was amazing and just saying, this is so great for me. Like I'm just spending the time to just dig in and just be with this piece instead of, looking at your phone or looking at headlines. I'm just digging in and it's so good for our brains too.
100%.
Yeah.
I had a barista tell me that, literally tell me that exact same thing
Yes.
like a week ago. She said, "Boy, I used to." She said she sat and was reading a paperback,
Uh-huh.
and she'd forgotten how good that feels, but how it takes some effort to get into that zone.
Right. Yes.
And that's usually more effort than we are willing to exert.
I know. And the
Um,
reward is so much greater than wasting time looking at your phone and just doom scrolling or whatever people do.
yeah, it's our generation's sugar.
Yeah, right.
Our generation's sugar. And just like we had to grow, or a generation or two before us had to learn how to not eat candy all day, even though they had the means to.
Right. Right.
This is our candy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm as guilty as anyone
Yeah.
when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you talk about like just government supporting these things. I've listened to a couple times the mayor of Miami speak, and he is incredible, but talking about
Yeah.
just how they were so intentional about creating
Yep.
a culture and an ecosystem for, crypto, blockchain, AI, just kind of the whole thing just to thrive there and attract it. And it created that flywheel where more and more came and it got better and better and they were able to do better things in the city. And it's a testament. I mean, look at Miami now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, we're going to see pockets like this as we have, I think, throughout US's history.
Yeah.
Like, how did Silicon Valley become what it was, or
Right.
whatever? Um, we'll see pockets of this, or maybe even a chunk of it won't even be a little pocket like a city. It could be a chunk like a state, or like Wyoming or Montana doing things in crypto and med tech. But
Yes.
yeah, like a city can go in a very different direction. And I think these pivots can happen relatively quickly compared to years prior. Like it doesn't have to take a 10-year, oh, plan 2035. Let's plan for what Minneapolis will look like in 2035. And that's fine to
Absolutely.
have a big plan like that. But pivots can happen quicker nowadays with technology being as fast
Hmm.
as it is. And once you get started, you can get out ahead of the pack. I think relatively quickly as well. So yeah, we'll see where people are attracted to. Austin is hot right now.
Right. Right.
Um, my cousin lives there. I visited him in May, and oh, yeah, downtown feels really good.
Uh-huh.
Like,
I love
I mean, it
Austin.
was it was also May. It wasn't 95
Yeah,
degrees,
right, right.
but it felt alive, but not New York City alive, where the sidewalks are packed with people.
Yeah.
Just comfortable.
Uh-huh.
And again, as a visitor, it's got a whole different feel than if you
Yeah.
lived there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I compare it to say downtown Minneapolis or something, and
Which is
it's
dead. Yeah.
there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, a big difference in energy.
No, for sure.
Uh, so yeah, political leaders should if seeing their city ignite and catch the waves of the future, then hopping on these waves, I think, are vital.
Absolutely.
I just don't know if they're the priority of a lot of people who go into politics.
Right.
I don't know if they don't see it or if they don't like it or what, but
Yeah. No, you're right.
someone
Oh,
will. And that's why
right.
Austin is doing well and Miami and but Minnesota has a lot going for it, right? You're in the Twin Cities.
Yes. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of good foundation here. And
Yeah.
so we think at Minnesota Blockchain actually that we're not trying to be Silicon Valley. We're not trying to be Miami and have these
Uh-huh.
big, crazy cultural moving parties. And we're not Wall Street, We're the land of iron ore, grain, corn. Uh,
Yes.
we're the land of like post-it notes and
Uh-huh.
right, like these practical, really foundational products and industries.
Uh-huh.
And I think blockchain could be one too.
Yes.
Um, if some Minnesotans would put their heads together and really try to, what we're trying to do is make Minnesota a focus for blockchain legal education,
Okay. Okay.
blockchain related legal education.
Interesting.
So we've worked with St. Thomas School of Law the
Okay.
past two autumns, and we had a Web3 and Law conference 2 years ago, 2023, and then in 2024, right after the election, we had a blockchain in government event
Interesting.
where people spoke about how governments could integrate blockchain. Um, and we think that St. Thomas, they have a lot of actually blockchain adjacent or even focused academics working for them in the law school and other and business school and
Very
other
good.
parts of the college. And then we've worked with the law school a couple of times on these events. So we'd like to make St. Thomas help them become a hub for for blockchain education, especially in the legal realm. And there's so much there,
Yeah. That could be huge.
especially if you go outside of blockchain, but even within blockchain, smart contracts and oh,
Right.
how do I write my will if I have a bunch of crypto or what are the tax implications if I'm holding crypto? Can this company have Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Whatever.
Uh-huh.
Then if you go outside of that and go to AI, then it's like, well, what do I own as intellectual property and things like that. So there's a ton of material there to cover.
Yeah. I have to think at some point every single contract is on the blockchain. Every buy and sell of a home will be on the blockchain. I mean, it just cuts out all the middle
Records,
everything.
yeah.
It just happens. How about,
Hmm.
and we've touched on a few different things, but any particular just future trends or opportunities that you're seeing that you're most excited about? And then if so, how are you positioning yourself to either benefit or learn more?
I guess the one I'm most knowledgeable of is these startup societies.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, if you're accredited, you can invest in Prospera. I th At least you
Okay.
used they had it wide open for
Okay.
accredited investors to put money
Interesting.
in. They actually just got in February, I think February, they closed they were given $50 million from Coinbase.
Really?
So there's another tie-in to crypto. Oh,
Okay.
and they integrate crypto there, unlike any other place. I didn't even mention that.
Okay.
But Prospera, you can I think it's the only jurisdiction you can use Bitcoin as a unit of account.
Really?
I'm not sure if any company there does, but you
Uh-huh.
can. It's forward thinking.
Yes.
Bitcoin's not mature enough yet for that. It will be, and when it
Right.
is, Prospera's the place, perhaps. But then Infinita also created their own cryptocurrency, and you can use it to buy things there around Prospera and elsewhere on the island. That takes the token as well.
Very
And
interesting.
several businesses on the island take Bitcoin too. So yeah, I think these startup societies are a because the way they put it is what industry more than any other needs to be disrupted? Like you could say, oh, we need to disrupt the big five or however many media companies. So YouTube enables that because now I can create my own channel. Or oh, we need to break up the clear channel talk radio monopoly. Okay, well, we're doing that as we speak, right here,
Hmm.
recording this podcast.
Hmm.
Oh, we need to break up whatever. Well, Prospera says we should break up the industry of governance. We should
Yeah.
disrupt that because right now there are a number of companies offering this. There's 200 countries around the world, but many of them own these huge swaths of territory that are just waiting to be challenged.
Hmm.
And so I think we will see this challenge not just from um, these zones, but because these zones allow multiple different, this polycentric law, it allows various governments to compete for which of their rules will be adopted within the zone. I don't know. Maybe that's getting a little bit ahead of myself in what I quite understand about the zones, but
Hmm.
I just believe in the zones themselves as being startups, if you will, that are investable. So that's an opportunity for people who are looking to invest in things. If you've got the capital, Prospero would have been, and it still might be a good play for you.
Yeah.
Uh, the biotech community Infinita was taking investment as well to get their VC started. They invest themselves in startups there, Prospero.
Okay.
So there's a lot of room right there
Yeah.
for economic opportunity. Otherwise, I would hold Bitcoin and and maybe there are some other projects you believe in the crypto space
Uh-huh.
that will rise up like Ethereum has following Bitcoin. Otherwise, there's no Bitcoin is a great is a great bet too.
Uh-huh.
As commonly known as that is, I just have to say it because
Right.
I think it's going to continue to do very, very well.
Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic, Brandon. I really appreciate this. Any, I don't know, any part, and we'll share all your contact info and how to get a hold of you and
Sure.
Minnesota Blockchain Initiative and Periphery Media and
Yeah. Yeah, the
Prospera. But
periphery
yeah,
media will be where that video essay goes.
yes,
And the periphery on different social media and my name on different social media, you'll find my other, I'll post tidbits about this stuff, right, that I've been talking to you about,
sure.
in addition to other things that I share. So yeah, anyone is welcome to follow me and comment, push back, whatever.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
I just want what's best for humanity, I'd like to say, and I like to think. Of course, I've got my biases and my hangups like anyone else, I suppose. But when I really step back and take a look at what would be best for humanity, I see the flourishing that can come from the internet, from AI. There's a lot of hate to AI right now because of the confusion it's going to sow, and I totally see all that. It's going to be a mess. But I compare the internet and its um, secondary technologies, AI, crypto, to being like the printing press. And the printing
Right.
press broke up the Catholic Church's rule on Europe, and it was a bloody, messy century or more before we had all these other countries and their Protestant religions. And now we've got Amish to Southern Baptist that came out of the Reformation. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think similarly, we'll have a beautiful restructuring of societies ultimately because of the power of these technologies, or at least of restructuring of industries, whether it be academic, whether it be media, etc. So hang on through the messiness. Remember what's important in your life, community, family, your faith, whatever, and look for these opportunities because that's true truth disruption. There's opportunity unlike any other time. If you would have gotten in on the ground floor of the two cryptos behind you,
Uh-huh.
or perhaps Prospera or something like that, a number of startups in this space, ChatGPT or something, they're just this is why the rich and the poor are going like this
Uh-huh.
because the handful that got in early on Bitcoin and Ethereum are now way up here, like within a decade, they're gazillionaires. And yeah, it's kind of a crazy time. So it's important to stay grounded. And yeah, I guess that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Thanks for the chance to speak about all this stuff. It's not like I can just stop a guy on the sidewalk and talk to him
Yes.
about this stuff for an hour. Most don't much know anything about crypto, let alone Prospera.
Uh-huh.
So thank you for this opportunity. I hope you appreciate it, got something from it as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think our viewers and listeners will get huge value. And I personally, selfishly, I sure did. I mean, the Prospera decentralized communities, I mean, that is totally a new concept for me. And
Hmm.
that's very exciting.
Yeah, they've gotten the ear of some American politicians under the angle of, look, a lot of Americans have invested in this. And so, because right now the Honduran government has switched leadership since the inception of Prospera,
Uh-huh.
and this new government in Honduras, which is left-leaning, they're like, yeah, no, 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 we don't want this neocolonialism. That's their angle. And I get it. Like there's trade-offs. You do have to give up some autonomy of this land.
Yeah.
The trade-off is that you'll get this development and Hondurans will get jobs. But yeah, you'll lose control of that 55 acres or whatever it ends up being. Um, and right now they're not in favor of that. But Prospera is a largely an American driven. It was founded by a Venezuelan national, but
Okay.
he has lived in America for much of his life. So I think he might even be an American citizen. I don't know. Um, but there's a lot of American ties to that. So they've reached out to American politicians for support in this fight, to this challenge. And yeah, and Trump himself has talked about freedom cities.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so like, and it's in that vein, right?
Yes.
Like it's like let's set up areas where we can really let experimentation, because a lot of people, even if they're left, Bill Maher will often complain on his show about all the red tape in California.
Right. Yeah.
Like I just wanted to put up some solar panels, and it's been taking me like 3, 4 years just to get the
Uh-huh.
permit to dig in the ground. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that's widely recognized from the left and the right. And Trump in his big promise style said we're going to create freedom cities, and maybe there
Uh-huh.
will be these zones where there's
Yeah.
opportunities similar to prosper. We'll see, but I think that's coming.
No, that's awesome. Well,
And maybe you
Brandon,
can lobby your state or your city to be one such place. I don't
right.
know if we'll get very far in Minneapolis, but who knows?
I know. Well, if there's hope for California, which I'm not saying there is, then there could be hope for Minnesota.
Yeah,
But I don't know if there is hope
there
for
is.
California or Minnesota in that vein, but they kind of go hand in hand, those two states.
Wherever you have good people, smart people, capable people working together, there's always hope.
Hmm.
Um, I think Sodom and Gomorrah, or whatever, those are the extraordinary extremes,
Right.
that are to be lessons learned. Not, but we don't have to go biblical. We can just look at what happened 100 years ago or less in the Soviet Union, or
Uh-huh.
uh, So if we go too far one way or the other, we see what happens. Hopefully our better nature takes over. And I think just technology and decentralization also enables people to free up, whether the government wants them to or not.
Right.
You see more of
Exactly.
that happening around, like a state will thumb their nose at the federal government, or a city will thumb their nose at the feds. And but if there's good people there, entrepreneurial, good-hearted people, then yeah, the flexibility I think is there to steer things in a good direction.
Uh-huh. Oh, very good. Well, good. Well, Brandon, thank you very much. This has been awesome. Really appreciate your time, your knowledge, your wisdom, and sharing your story. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right.